Next up, I'd like to introduce Stephen Mee. Stephen is CEO and co-founder of Ahana, and today he's going to be talking a little bit more about some of the open features of the Open Data Lakehouse.
Hey everyone, great to see you all. So great to be here. I'm co-founder, CEO of Ahana. I'm also the governing board member of the Presto Foundation and have been for 2-3 years now. And really thank you all for coming to this event. As we've mentioned a few times here, we haven't been together, so it's really great to see everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm modeling the Lakehouse shirt that you all can get. So stay for the evening where there'll be a journey to go through to the Lakehouse, and you all get one of these following the journey. So I don't know, what do you all think of this Lakehouse shirt? Also want to thank Meta for originally doing all the Pixax work as Facebook to create Presto, to then build it out, open source it, and then donate it to the Linux Foundation, and created Presto Foundation along with the other founding members, which was Uber, Twitter, and Alibaba. So really, really appreciate and just wanted to recognize and call them out, so let's give them all a hand. Ahana makes Presto easy in the cloud. It's a managed service for Presto. But I'm not going to be talking about Ahana per se. I wanted to take a step back and look at the industry. And one of the things that's occurring is this architectural shift to the Lakehouse. And we're at a little bit of a crossroads in my view, because the Lakehouse can either be more like a private country club or a community center. So I'll be talking about that. First off, a little bit more about me. I've been in open source for quite a while. Been through a bunch of different companies. Open source Couchbase was a NoSQL database, distributed database. I was employee 13 there back in the day. Also, I was at Mesosphere, that's open source container orchestration. And then Alluxio, open source data orchestration for hybrid and multi-cloud environments. And so I wanted to bring some of that experience to the table as I talk through what I see happening. First of all, some mega trends. In terms of what we're seeing, of course, companies are getting more and more data from all over, from their own operations, from third-party data. And to stay competitive in today's environment, they have to make good decisions. And if they're not based on data-driven decisions, they tend to be less effective and lose competitive advantage. So it's now become table stakes, having more AI, ML, and also other analytical workloads. That's a big deal for anyone in infrastructure platforms like us. Number two, you all heard about the data exploding. Well, the latest factoid from reInvent Keynote last week was that the next 5 years, the amount of data generated will be more than all the data generated up until this point in time, right? So that's a lot of data, and that's mostly going to end up in lakes. And those lakes are now getting more fit-for-purpose engines to achieve those data-driven insights. And that's a shift that's taking place. Because of these megatrends, the Lakehouse has occurred. And while there was lakes from the Hadoop era, HDFS, and systems like that, things really got kicked off with the Hadoop, the Lakehouse paper. And that was only in 2020, not that long ago, that the Lakehouse paper came out. So I believe we're at the early days, and it's a really exciting time to be involved in this ecosystem. And it set up this challenge for warehouses versus unifying everything together for those workloads. This is ML workloads, AI analytics workloads, near real-time streaming and historical data. And some of you may not know that some of the biggest lakehouses in the world run Presto. I think Tim was mentioning, they call it their warehouse. Well, the new term is now a lakehouse. And they have formats that they work with to make it more and more like a database. And these are some of the public data that's out there at Presto meetups. They've talked, Meta sharing millions of queries on 300, 500 petabytes of data. Uber, huge clusters as well. And most recently, ByteDance did a great meetup talk. I encourage you to check those out. And so we believe in Presto. I love Presto. I believe in Presto is delivering the most open, cost-effective compute for SQL processing, not only for this size, but for everyone. And that's why I'm excited about Presto. What's another trend? Another trend, as the markets start to open up, you see vendors start to look at ways to make money. And there's a lot of commercialization of open source business models. As most of the Lakehouse components, they are open source. And I've lived through a lot of these shifts from 1.0, mainly support on open source software, 2.0, more the open core model with licensing that lets you get proprietary features. And now it's moved to managed services where you can get software that's already been built for you as a service. Another big trend is adding more proprietary features as part of the value proposition. And that creates some more lock-in. There's also systems that are out there that are just complete replacements for engines that are completely proprietary. And we're seeing that happen more and more, causing major shifts in the industry. What are those shifts? It means that this community can come together to make more and more open technology out there. And lastly, there's shrinking alternatives. When companies that have control of projects, that some are starting to have a lever, they'll change licensing, and this has been happening more and more. I think it's a troubling trend. And so that's why I brought up this talk. Is the Lakehouse going to be more like a private country club where you have to have a certain financial ability, walk and talk and handshake a certain way? Or is it going to be more like everyone can be allowed in and anyone can participate and we work together and collaborate for the good of the society overall? That may be like me over there kind of, I'm trying to be peaceful, but I'm really struggling. And I love yoga because yoga makes you look at yourself and ask you, why are we all doing this? We hope we're doing this for the good of the whole world. That's what I look at us for. Okay, so let's dive into what the open Lakehouse could look like. And I call this the 5 degrees of openness, or the 5 shades of openness. And the degrees are, I'll say that we'll start off with the easy ones and they get more and more as you go along. Number 1, open spec format standards. This allows you to have more interoperability. There's less lock-in if there's a format that you can work with, right? Number 2, open source code. This is code that you can look at, you could clone it, you could then change it yourself, do something with that. And so that's number 2. Then it gets a little bit more. When we start talking about open development, this means that you can see not just the code just didn't show up, but you can see how it's being developed. And you can see the discussions around that code and how it changed. And that can increase the velocity. It is challenging sometimes when you have to work with a community, but the benefit is that there's a saying that with more eyeballs, all bugs look shallow. And so we believe that open development is another form of openness. And going further, open community. Tim just talked about that. You can now be part of a community. You can join. The doors are open. All you got to do is show up and try to contribute. And there's a path by which you can then become a contributor, to be a committer, to be even a technical steering committee member. And that's something that some open projects have, and some other projects, even though they may be open source, don't have this. And lastly, open governance. And governance, it's kind of like democracy. This is the highest form. You don't really think about it until you're faced with it. But when you need it, you kind of need it. And things like Linux Foundation and the Presto Foundation have bylaws that provide that governance. What does governance really mean? It spells out, kind of like some things that are spelled out in the Presto Creed over there, how things are meant to be. And then how decisions are made. And how you can become a committer. And that there's term limits. Stuff like that. And I would argue that Presto Foundation has all 5 of these things. Presto, the project itself, all 5 of these things to the kilt. And I'll give an example here, my time at Mesosphere. I was there in 2015. This is the same time that Kubernetes came out. Mesosphere was early in the container area. There was a new whole paradigm around containers, right? Before that, it was all VMs. Virtualization kind of was happening. There was a locked, proprietary vendor, VMware, that was a huge business going on, but containers started to come out all in open source. And they needed to have these things. It wasn't just, now you had containers, you had to schedule them, you now had to have things like service discovery, you had to have container registries, all these things weren't there back when in 2015. And we talked with other companies, vendors, developers like you all that wanted to be part of this. And there was quite a bit of what I felt was a land grab, where people say, oh, I'm going to do that, so you don't do that, you do this other stuff. And it became one of these things that I saw that individual organizations wanted to control it and make their part bigger for themselves. Yes, it was interoperable, but it wasn't really something that was collaborative. And so, Mesosphere on the orchestration side was there with Mesos, single org control. There was also at the time something called Docker Swarm. I don't know if you remember that. They later became Docker Data Center. And then, of course, Kubernetes. Google donated Kubernetes to the Linux Foundation, created CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and it was community controlled. What does community controlled mean? It means that there's multiple organizations involved that have a stake in this, that can help decide things, that can govern, they can watch over things. Presto Foundation Governing Board has that. In terms of what happened, you all know. There's a Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and the industry exploded to the benefit of everyone. And there was collaboration across those last three, where it was open communities, it was open development, it was also open governance, that I believe really made this happen. And so here we are today with the data infrastructure side. This is Andreessen Horowitz Modern Emerging Data Infrastructure. They kind of put a map up of wow, the data infrastructure is getting pretty complicated, and the Lakehouse is in the center of it. There's interoperability there. There's APIs, there's standards, Parquet, ORC, Avro formats. There's table types that are happening. And there's a number of different fit-for-purpose engines that are out there, some open source, some not. But what I'd say is that what we'd like to do is see the whole industry come together to level up and to provide more cohesiveness, because that kind of the same thing is happening where it's a little bit of a land grab, things don't really work well together. Ideally, there'd be more consistent metadata over data versions where it's all working together. But today, it's kind of disjoint. And so one of the challenges, just as one example, is the table formats. Lack of generalized abstractions. And not a real consistent way to ensure that you have privileges that are going against table versions. And we're working with the Hoodie community and Vinod at One House, and it's been a great collaboration talking about, okay, how do we make this something that we can make more cohesive for the betterment of the whole industry? And we'd like to work with the Iceberg community and the Delta community in the same way. But they've been fantastic to work with, and we think that's a good example. There's other examples of collaboration that we can do. Working with Meta on Protissimo has been a fantastic working and collaborative environment. We're excited about that too. So we think there's a truly open opportunity here, and we'd love to work together with you all. We invite you all to participate. And if there's one thing I can leave you with, is our North Star is building great database technology with great governance, and that's going to make Presto the exciting, enduring project forevermore. Thank you very much.
As a reminder, we have a full day, great day, a lot of different types of talks. We have users talking about how they're using Presto in production. We have partners talking about what they're building within the ecosystem, and we have a lot of engineering talks that will be going into more depth on what to expect on the Presto roadmap. So now I think we have a little bit of a break. Highly encourage you to go check out the sponsor booths. They're in where the food is in the other big room. Go chat with them, grab some coffee, grab some food, and get ready for our next set of sessions. Girish, anything else before we close here?
Yeah, so it's once again great to see all of you. It's awesome that we are having this in person. We're hoping to do this earlier, but at least we got to do it now, and in this historic venue, the Computer History Museum. Actually, I used to work at Google for over a decade, but this is the first time I've been here, and that's all thanks to Presto, so that's pretty awesome.
Cool. And one last thing, we mentioned the Credo over here, and I think all of our keynote speakers have signed it. We're going to move it into the registration area, so give it a read. We would love for you to check it out and to sign it, and so we all kind of stand together with this Presto Credo. All right? Thanks, everyone. See you at the next keynote.